Good morning. So, my plea hearing was yesterday, and let me tell y'all how it went. All the usual get there, whatever. My judge, my sentencing judge, because in the federal system, you'll get one judge from your plea hearing to your sentencing. That'll be the same judge you go in front of for any probation violations if you're on pre sentence release or after you're incarcerated. That's the same judge you go to for any appeals on your case. You get one judge throughout the entire federal process. My judge was very thorough, which I liked. It was a little redundant, but I prefer overly thorough than underly thorough. I did get pre-sentence release, as expected. So I'm here in the free world. They assigned a federal PO to do my PSR and my big PSR, like the 15, 20 page, the one that's actually going to be looked at sentencing, the one that will be used while I'm incarcerated to determine what programming I do or do not have. And also, that same PSR is used upon your release to evaluate what your situation is going to be regarding halfway house, home confinement, any mandatory programming, that kind of thing. And what your guidelines, your restrictions or your rules are going to be. So you really want to, my lawyer and the federal PO that's going to do my big PSR, are coordinating their schedules to figure out when we can sit down and do this. But you really want to be very honest and very thorough and very, very detailed with that. And you really, after the federal PO does it, you and your lawyer will get a copy, and you have a right at that point to dispute any details within the PSR, and you want to really go through that very intently when that time comes. I was also assigned my federal PO for my supervised release now, pre-sentence. They put me on what they call an unsecured $10,000 bond, because the feds do not do a money bond system. You don't have to worry about if you have money or not, if you could afford a bond in the federal system. If they choose to put you on pre-sentence release, it's considered a form of bond, but there's no money exchanged up front. The only time money becomes a factor in a federal bond is if the defendant were to go on the run, and then the defendant would owe whatever the bond amount was to the courts at that point. Because that's basically the charge of recovering you, of finding you and bringing you in, which obviously will not be an issue for me. The terms of my pre-sentence release probation were kind of surprising to me. There's a lot of things that are going to have to change in my day-to-day life to accommodate that, and I'm okay with that, because I would rather be in the free world jumping through hoops than incarcerated, for sure. It's just, a lot of things are going to have to be added to my schedule. Some of the things that you can potentially expect if you get pre-sentence release at your plea hearing is some people go to a locked drug treatment facility. Most people in pre-sentence release go to a locked drug treatment facility or a psychiatric facility. Those who are actually left to be in the free world, you have to do a weekly check-in. It's a sheet you fill out and you give it to your PO. You'll do this in your post-incarceration probation as well. There's a number you call Sunday through Thursday to see if you'll be doing a drug test, a urinalysis that day. If your color is called, it's the color line, as people call it. Thankfully, I got a color that's not, comes up about once a month. You may have to do substance abuse counseling. You may have to seek mental health counseling. I know for me, I got to do a psych eval, but I think that's pretty standard for people on pre-sentence release. I think they add that to the PSR. And I think it kind of skips having to do one when you actually get to prison, which is, good, to get some things out of the way. My judge did say that he was not intending to give me an upward departure. He's not intending to sentence me beyond the maximum 4 years of my plea deal. So that's reassuring. That was very comforting to hear. After the hearing, I then had to go be processed by the marshals, which were also in the federal court building. They had to take a DNA sample, do fingerprints, take a lot of photos of me, type in a lot of information. The marshal said usually the process goes a little quicker for folks. It took longer for me because I wasn't already in their system. Apparently they get a lot of frequent flyers and return people in the federal system. I'm, of course, not one of them. Once that was done, I went to the clerk's office there in the federal court, and I paid my $100 assessment fee. Pay this the day of your plea hearing. That is when you can pay it, at the earliest. Pay it, get it out of the way, and get a receipt. because if you do not have a receipt for it, whether you paid it or not, you're going to end up paying it again while you're incarcerated, and it's going to come out of your commissary funds. So, and if you just don't get any commissary at all the whole time you're in there, and you ain't got a job, so they can take money out of, then you could be held at the halfway house until it's paid. So you really don't want to complicate your situation by not just paying. The assessment fee you'll be charged is $100 per count, per charge. So if you have a case that has 5 charges, let's say, or 3 charges, then you'll be charged $500 or $300 assessment fee. In my case, there's only 1 charge, so it was a $100 assessment fee. I paid that. I got my receipt. The federal courts later emailed my lawyer, who then forwarded to me an email of an electronic version of my receipt. So if you lose your paper receipt, you don't have to travel back to where you went to court to get a copy. You can, get it online and print it out. You want to have copies of that to give the federal probation office when they do your PSR. You want to have a copy of that to take with you into prison to give your counselor. Another copy in the free world that can be sent into your counselor or caseworker at prison in case they somehow one you brought in gets confiscated or lost or whatever. And you want to have one for when you come home to give the halfway house, and also, readily made a copy to give your PO when you come home. And the PO that's going to be supervising my pre-sentence release is a different PO than the PO that's doing my PSR. And I think that's interesting, but I get where having multiple parties involved with the same person creates some, I guess, level of like checks and balances. But after I paid my assessment fee, you have 7 days after your plea hearing, at least I did, to process with the federal probation. Get your terms, go over your paperwork, all that kind of stuff. Meet your PO. I went ahead and just did that while I was in the courthouse because the federal probation office is also in the federal courthouse. And I got that out of the way. I met with my PO. We went over all the paperwork, signed everything I need to sign. She let me know what the rules were, what her expectations were, what protocol would be if I need to go out of state to take, a loved one to an appointment or something, because where I live is in West Virginia, but it's literally on the border of West Virginia and Ohio. So a lot of times people in my area have to actually cross the state line, just for routine appointments and things. So, so we discussed that. Also, I have a custody situation, 50-50 custody of my son with his father. His father lives in another state. So, the PO is going to try to get worked in, because it wasn't done ahead of time, into my terms that I can every 28 days, go get my son to bring him home for 2 weeks, without having to have what they call traveling papers. Generally, on federal probation or supervised release, you're going to need, if you're going outside of your district, my district is the Southern District of West Virginia. It's about half the state. If you're going out of state or out of your district, especially out of state, you need to have on your person what is called traveling papers. These are documents your PO fills out that allow you, if you're pulled over, if you have an interaction with law enforcement, allow you to show them that although you're on federal supervision, you're allowed to be where you're at. You don't want to be out of bounds. You don't want to be someone who has an interaction with law enforcement and you're in a place that you're not technically allowed to be, because at that point you can be arrested. And if you're not arrested at that point, your PO will certainly be informed. And, after prison probation, federal probation, the PO makes a judgment call on whether or not you'll be arrested or penalized for various violations. When you're on pre-sentence release probation, it's a little different. And every infraction, no matter how small, gets sent directly to your sentencing judge. And then your sentencing judge will decide, does he want to just pull your pre-sentence release and just go ahead and lock you up because you're being a headache for folks and nobody feels like dealing with it, you're not being grateful for the freedom you have? Does he want to add additional charges? Does he want to just let it slide? Does he want to have you brought back into the court, either on your own accord or via the marshal service, to be held accountable and explain yourself for whatever it is you've gotten in trouble for? So you really want to just stay out of trouble. And one thing, I thought that's crossed my mind, I'm sure crossed most people's minds, is, when I go to sentencing, this would be a good thing I can mention, I got into no trouble while I was on bond, and, on this pre-sentence, release, I did the right thing. But the reality is, in the federal court system, no one's going to pat you on the back for doing what you should do, for doing the obvious right thing. No, you don't get no points for that. If you don't do the right thing, you're going to get in trouble for that. But unless you're going above and beyond as far as the level of do right you're doing, don't expect kudos or a pat on the back. If you go into a federal court and you tell the judge, oh, I did the right thing. I didn't mess up on pretrial release. I didn't mess up on probation. I did what I was supposed to do. They're not giving out prizes for that. And actually, you'll probably insult the judge a little bit because he'll think you're one of these people that feels entitled to like a participation trophy because you showed up, which is a really entitled attitude to have. And when it comes to your presence in federal court, you definitely want to really gear your attitude and your mindset way, to an extreme on the humble end. You don't even want to, touch, the entitled end of perspective. But once all that was done, I went to my court hearing was scheduled for 1:30. I was at the courthouse at 1, a few minutes before actually. I'm very on time, I'm very organized, I'm very punctual. We didn't actually get started with the plea hearing, I would say, till probably about 1:30, a few minutes after. The prosecutor was running late, which he then, at the end, apologized to the judge in the court for. But, excuse me. But I didn't get out of the courthouse until I was in there at least 4 hours. I mean, just in the courtroom alone was over an hour. And then, the marshals, and when they initially processed me in through their computer system and stuff and did all that stuff, then the guy's like, okay, we're done, and hits a button. And then he's like, oh, shit. And I'm like, what, whoa, chief, you know what I mean? And he was like, oh, the system's glitching. I'll have to redo that whole thing. So, I was there much longer than expected. When I went to the clerk's office and paid my assessment fee, she was like, oh, so you're paying on behalf of Audrey Thompson. And I was like, no, ma'am, I am Audrey Thompson. And she seemed a little bewildered because I guess it's not common that most people really handle their business, to that extent of just paying their assessment fee straight out of plea hearing. In fact, it's most people out of their plea hearing, like I said, are either pre-sentence release into a secured facility, so you're not really, you're not in a free world, or they're already remanded into prison, and then the judge just chooses to have them stay there because the federal probation department has determined they're either a flight risk or a threat to the community. So thankfully, I have made some bad decisions, and that's why I'm going through the federal criminal process. But thankfully, I've also made a lot of good decisions in my life, by not being a career criminal, by keeping a stable residence. There are a lot of things that I've done well, and as a result of that, that has really afforded me the luxury and the privilege of being on pre-sentence release and, not having to go to prison yet. Also, I had thought that I would probably end up having my sentencing hearing in August. I'd been watching, some activity of my judge, in his courtroom. Been kind of keeping an eye on that for a little while, to kind of get an idea about the judge and how he does things. And I know that recently he had been sentencing people, or been scheduling their sentencing hearing for August, which is 2 months from now. This is June. But I didn't know because my plea hearing got, postponed for a week, if my hearing would be in August or if it would, go into September, because obviously there's only so much room on the docket. And I have what's called a senior federal judge. Actually, my federal judge is currently the longest sitting federal judge in the country. He was appointed by President Ford, which is kind of a cool, little fact about him. But my judge actually, his September sentencing docket must be full, which is fine by me. I definitely am happy to have more time to get things, in order as well as I can than less. But so it is the 16th or 19th. I want to say 16th. The 16th of September is when I go back. So I have 3 months before I go back for sentencing, which is kind of nice because it gives me a little more breathing room. It gives me a little more time with my son. It gives me a little more time with my parents and my daughter and my brother and my friends and some of my other family members. It gives me a little more time to get my home emptied out and really kind of get my bearings. So, I'm grateful for that. On one hand, at this point, there are a lot of days where you just feel like, I'm going to prison. I just want to know what my sentence is and get it started. But on the other hand, I look around at my life and I'm like, I'm really not ready. And not that I think anyone is rarely ever fully ready to just go, but definitely I need to get a lot more things in order. And I'm very grateful for my judge allowing me this time on pre-sentence release to have more time to get things in order. Our cat had kittens. I need to rehome them. We need to figure out exactly what's going on with one of my parents' medical situations and be as proactive with that with the time that I have, and which is a blessing for every minute that I can be there to support these people who have, my family, my friends who have been supportive of me and who I will sadly, and I'm almost embarrassed to admit, but it's just the reality, will greatly rely upon during my incarceration. You know, my oldest child, is at a transitional point in life, and I'm really happy that I'll be able to be here in the free world to be a support during that, a comfort for her during her own growth, as an adult, and and have more time with my son. My sentencing is in September, so that means throughout the summer I'm gonna be able to take my son to the pool. He loves swimming. He's like a little miniature Michael Phelps. But I'm gonna be able to get a lot of my own health issues better addressed, better assessed, better treated prior to incarceration, because I know once I'm incarcerated, it's just not really gonna happen for me. So I need to do what I can do now, and especially not knowing, am I gonna be incarcerated for a year and a day, which is a common sentence, with the feds and first-time offenders. Am I gonna get the full 4 years, which is the top end of my plea deal? I don't know what I'm gonna get. So, what I do know is I could be remanded at sentencing, or maybe a self-surrender. If I'm a self-surrender, I'll probably have a very short window of time from sentencing to I actually go to prison. Um, but once I'm in prison, I'm going to get pretty much my medical attention and treatment, dental, vision, whatever, is going to be pretty much non-existent, because that's the level of care you get. So, but in closing, yesterday went well. It was my plea hearing, it's not a joyous occasion, anything that moves you along quicker, further to the inevitably finding yourself in federal prison. But I do feel like overall it went well as it could, within perspective, and, I'm very happy with my judge. A couple people in the courthouse had just kind of mentioned in passing, that they feel my judge is a very fair person. And for me, that's a big thing, is when it comes to someone like a judge, someone of authority, is, I just, one of the things that I greatly appreciate and hope for is fairness. So, I do believe that the assessment others have given me is correct, that I probably have a very fair judge. I know I certainly have a very mentally sharp judge, and a very observant judge, and a very well-seasoned judge. So, and me knowing myself, and knowing the truth of the role I did or did not play in things, I think my judge, with all those attributes, will probably see things for what they are. And I feel like if a person sees my situation for what it truly is, they will show me leniency. I just think that would be what most people would do. But again, it's like everything. There's an element of things being left to chance. But yeah, so that's the after plea hearing thoughts. I'll probably make another video letting y'all know how the PSR goes whenever that's actually done. That's going to be like a 15, 20 page, like basically a book. So once I go through that process with my lawyer and that federal probation officer, and once me and my lawyer get the document and we go over it and we try to make our modifications, and once that whole PSR thing is out of the way, I will then do a video about PSRs, like the whole process beginning to end, what to expect, what to be conscientious of, that kind of thing. And then I'll also probably make a couple videos about preparation for sentencing. I'll probably make a short video heading into sentencing, which may be my last video. If I'm on pre-sentence release, I'll actually get to make a after sentencing thoughts video. If not, you'll be seeing that whenever I come home from prison. So, which is a crazy thought. But so there'll be a handful of more videos to come over the next few months, and I really appreciate those of you who are watching. I really hope that my perspective and my observations and my journey can provide information and comfort, to some of you who are in my situation. And for those of you who are generally curious about how this plays out and what it's like to be the defendant in this type of situation, whether it be for academic purposes or just general curiosity, I hope that my videos have been helpful for you as well. So, I want to give back and do right and assist others to my greatest ability. This is definitely a point in my life where, I've done some wrongs. I'm trying to make amends. So, anywho, so that's that. And I got to sign my inmate number, which, fun fact, I asked several people, including inmates, federal inmates, former and current, when do you get assigned your inmate number? And everyone kind of had a different answer. A lot of people said as soon as they press charges on you, or as soon as you're indicted, or as soon as you're arrested, or, just there were, a myriad of answers, pretty much all of which, just the only conclusive thing people agreed upon was, well, before you go to prison. But I found out the actual answer to that. I was assigned my inmate number yesterday. And your inmate number, also known as your BOP number, your Bureau of Prisons number, is actually your United States Marshal Service number. But everyone calls it, even the BOP call it your inmate number. But it's actually your United States Marshal Service number. And with this number, the purpose of this number, interestingly, the last 3 digits will identify what location you lived in when your charges originated. But in the first 5 digits are just, very specific to you, it's your number. But the whole 8-digit sequence is your full, BOP inmate number, also U.S. Marshal number. But the reason why you're assigned this number by the U.S. Marshal Service is as soon as you're processed as a federal defendant. Now, if you're a person whose door was kicked in, and you became detained, and then the feds picked up your charges, it would be shortly after that you would get processed by the marshals. If you're a person who was indicted and, and your first, basically the first time you go in front of the federal judge, immediately thereafter, if not before, you'll be processed by the marshals. For me, my first appearance was my plea hearing. And then when the marshals process you, you are automatically assigned a U.S. Marshal Service number. And that is the number that will be your AKA inmate number, that will be your BOP number. That's the number that will stick with you until your case is, all the court stuff is out of the way, any period of incarceration is done, and any period of post-incarceration probation is done. Like, until your case has completely ended in every aspect, that number will be connected to you. And the reason they do that is because if you were to escape or run or do anything, they got to go looking for you, pretty much. It's very, your information is very readily accessible, because with that inmate number pulls up your entire file, including your PSR, which is, in-depth family information and demographics and stuff, and a lot of personal information about you, a lot of your life history and your personal, dynamics. So that number is attached to you. Really, primarily, the BOP uses it as an identifying tool, probably the most common identifying tool, but really as a security measure. This is kind of like your brand. People burn symbols onto animals and stuff so they know who owns them. Your inmate number, your Marshal Service number, your BOP number, which are all the same thing, will be assigned to you once you're processed by the marshals, which will generally happen shortly before or after your first appearance in front of your judge. So for those of you who are wondering the same thing, that is the answer to that question. So the more you know, right? But I hope everyone has a wonderful day and a good day. God bless. All prayers and positive vibes are greatly appreciated. And I will put my full name and my BOP number in the description down below. So if once I'm incarcerated, you want to write me or see how I'm doing or whatever, you can do so. Yeah. Also, if you like the video, hit subscribe if you want to know when new videos come out. There's a little alarm dingy thing you can hit after subscribe. I think you actually get notifications, because these videos will become pretty much non-existent while I'm incarcerated. And so if you would like to know, because life happens, people move on, whatever. So but when I come out of prison, if you want to be notified, when I make a video, because I'm home from prison years from now, potentially, you'll know, because you'll get a little notification, and then you can see how my life or my journey has evolved at that point. So, thank you for traveling with me down this road. And, I really hope, again, I've been a support or assistance or some source of guidance or information for some of you. So have a beautiful day. And, you're somebody's favorite person. So keep that in mind. Goodbye.